the big event of that year was we brought in tall ships from around the world, and we had them docked along the waterfront. I mean, this was a really big deal. I'll never forget a phone call I got. A woman called and she said, "I don't know why you keep saying this event is going to happen. You know these ships aren't going to come to Mobile." And I was stunned that there were people who thought so little of the city, and they live in a place that they had no faith in. And I thought, well, this is what we need to work on. We have got to change the image of the city and how people feel about it.
Welcome to Playing Above the Line. We're a podcast that takes a peek into the daily lives of community and business leaders. Each week, we uncover different views of the path to growth, leadership, and achieving success. I'm Dennis Sharon.
And I'm Alan Cave. Dennis and I are both shareholders at Hartman, Blackman & Kilgore. We're a full-service accounting and business consulting firm. As CPAs, we've had the unique opportunity to work with many different leaders and decided we wanted a way to share their incredible stories that we've learned along the way. Our leadership is brought to you this week by Carol Hunter. Carol is the Communications Director for the Downtown Mobile Alliance. On this episode, you'll get to hear about the work that's going into creating living, eating, and shopping spaces to transform downtown Mobile. Well, Dennis, it's good to see you today.
Same here, Alan. I'm looking forward to our guest and having a great show on Playing Above the Line today.
As am I. So our guest today is Carol Hunter. And Carol, welcome. Thanks for coming and joining us for a few minutes.
Well, I'm so glad to be here with you today.
Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I am the Director of Communications for the Downtown Mobile Alliance and have been there since it started operations back in 2005, 2 weeks after Katrina, which was quite an interesting time to begin a new operation. And our teams spent those first few weeks just cleaning up debris. Since then, we have grown and expanded our mission, and of course the clean and safe and beautiful aspect of what we do is still top of our program of work. Mm-hmm. But we now focus on economic development, marketing, and advocacy. Policy work is a huge part of what we do now. But you see, there have been some studies now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where first you have to have food and water and shelter. Then you need security. You need to feel safe. And then you need support of family, friends, and you kind of move up that triangle until you get to self-actualization. Well, the same is true for cities. And, the first thing, cities have to be safe.
Right.
And then they have to be attractive, appealing, and that's the clean and beautiful part. And then they have to be vibrant. And so you move up until you get to this, great active city 24/7. And so we've been working on that pyramid, that triangle.
Well, that's great. Well, back up to Katrina. How was downtown Mobile affected by Katrina? Because that was a major disaster that hit our part of the country. For people who may not know that are listening, elsewhere. But how was downtown impacted by that particular storm? And then how long did it take to kind of recover from that and then, move forward?
Katrina brought in water to about a third of downtown. And although the damage wasn't necessarily extensive because many of our buildings have some floodproofing or they're above the level that would have had a lot of intrusion of water. But there were multiple buildings that had to be just gutted and redone. The good thing was that because many of the buildings, most of them, I suspect, had insurance, a lot of the renovation work that needed to happen anyway on buildings that were vacant or had gotten pretty dated, a little shabby, that work happened during Katrina. So while it was incredibly disruptive, it began a phase of rehabilitation of buildings that continues today.
So the Alliance itself, this was an organization formed by the city of Mobile, or is this an organization by downtown merchants, or?
Both. Back in 1990, the city organized a department that was Main Street Mobile. And it was, completely under the city government, managed by Elizabeth Stevens, who is our president and CEO now. And it began the process. The major effort was a complete redesign of the streetscape, Dolphin Street primarily. And I have pictures taken in 1998 of Dolphin Street, and it was 2 lanes of traffic all the way down going into downtown. And the first thing we did was Main Street Mobile, I was not there at the time, but the first thing the city did, put on-street parking on Dolphin Street, because you can't have a retail environment without on-street parking. You just can't. It doesn't exist. And so that began to create that vibrancy, a more pedestrian atmosphere, because pedestrians don't like to walk next to a freeway, which any 2-lane road in one direction is going to have fast traffic. So they put in the granite curbs. They widened sidewalks to allow for the kinds of cafe dining that you see now on the sidewalks, put in granite curbs, tree wells, planted street trees. None of that was there in 1988. And they also created some programming to bring people back downtown. We lost a generation of people who, when their parents moved to the suburbs, they grew up watching, Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best. All of those shows took place in the suburbs. That was the reality of life in the 50s and 60s. So we had to reintroduce a generation to downtown with programming for children. And so that was a lot of what Main Street did back then. There was policy. It wasn't, you couldn't live downtown or you couldn't live above a storefront without a variance. And we began to change policy so that you could live anywhere downtown by right. You didn't have to ask for permission. You could just live downtown, which was how downtown, how it was created, where merchants were downstairs and they lived upstairs. I mean, that was, every urban center developed in that manner. So that was in the 1990s, all that work happened. And, after all of that public money had been spent, we'd begun to see some important changes. But the property owners and business leaders thought that, well, we can escalate this. We like what we're seeing, but we know the public investment is probably as much as we're going to see. We now need to take some responsibility for creating the next level of improvement for downtown. And so, working with the Main Street Mobile organization at the time, we formed what's called a self-help business improvement district. And we are funded by assessment on property owners in the eastern third of downtown Mobile, essentially the core, the central business district, and have been since 2005.
Wow. I just learned something I did not know. I did not know that part of it there with the assessment. That's fantastic. When you go back and you talked about the triangle Maslow's theory, and you start telling the story of what's going on downtown, you see everything that you've started, or Main Street Mobile started, and now this continuing with the Alliance and influencing not just people, but a generation, or actually probably 3 generations now that you're influencing to bring them back. And I can remember as a kid, I can't remember the department store. Is it Hamels maybe? There was something in this early 70s, I think it ended up being Gaffer's, that was downtown. That was the only time as a child I ever remember going to downtown Mobile.
Right. Was
that. And then I remember in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, see, you're the generation that we lost.
Right. In the mid-'80s, the only time I went down in the mid to late 80s because work. Someone may have been in one of the towers, and I had to go do some work. But beyond that, it was like, get in and get out.
Right. And the transportation planners at the time wanted you to be able to get out of downtown as fast as you could. Mm-hmm. So they created all of these one-way, 2-lane streets going, at the time, west. That's where most of the population was shifting. And St. Francis Street, St. Louis Street became freeways because they thought the best way to help downtown was to get people out of downtown as fast as they could. one-way streets are just the best way to kill a business. We know that now. But people did want to get out of downtown, so it was this cycle of transportation decisions. First they drew a ring around downtown. I don't know whether they wanted to keep people who were downtown from getting out into the rest of the world, or keep people from elsewhere coming into downtown. I don't know, but that ring, the Henry Aaron Loop, we call it now. It's a very hostile environment for pedestrians and bicycles. Anybody who's trying to walk across it with a stroller, for heaven's sakes, is risking their lives in many places. And so these decisions were very anti-urban. And the consequences were that we saw businesses flee, we saw blight spread, and this perception that I want to get out of downtown as fast as I could.
So that urban flight then that took place, decades ago has reversed and people are coming back. Why is that? I have my ideas. I think it may have to do with a sense of community. It's nice when you live in a little community where you can go to your neighborhood restaurant, your neighborhood bar, your little neighborhood dress shop or whatever, and you see the people that live in your same condo, building every morning, walking to the coffee shop to get coffee. I mean, is that part of it, or what do you attribute the fact that this reverse urban flight's taking place? I mean, the people are coming back and they're really revitalizing, Mobile and other cities as well. So,
Alan, you're absolutely right. That is a big part of it. There are a lot of factors, one of which is that children tend to not want the lifestyle their parents had. So if you grew up in the suburbs, a lot of those young people, that's not the lifestyle that they want, even though millennials and their parents actually are much closer, as the two generations are closer than any two that we've seen in history. But yet they don't necessarily want that lifestyle. And remember, millennials grew up watching Friends and Seinfeld and Sex and the City. They grew up watching this urban lifestyle, which wasn't available to, as baby boomers were growing up.
Right,
so that whole experience was something that was not foreign to them and wasn't necessarily scary to them. So part of it is generational, but part of it is that need to make connections. And another thing that we've learned is the thing that makes people most unhappy, Americans anyway, is the number one thing is that commute. The thing that makes them the most happy is spending time with family and friends. So you can understand why that commute makes them most unhappy, because it takes away from that, right? It doesn't take away from your work, because you've got to work however many hours you have to work. So that commute takes away time from the thing that makes you most happy. So by creating walkable neighborhoods, and they don't have to be downtown. What we're seeing now is cities are looking, and Mobile is doing the same thing with a whole massive rezoning of the entire city where you can allow mixed use to happen. We went through, I have to go back a little bit, in the 50s, there were court cases that created what we call Euclidean zoning, where uses were completely separated. And the intent was admirable. You didn't want a factory spewing toxins in the air next to an elementary school. But it went so far as you could only have residential uses in these wide swaths of area. So those residents had no choice but to get in a car and drive to all their daily needs. And we're looking at that again and saying, is this sustainable? Because it isn't. And so how do we create these neighborhood city centers, like little city centers? And you've seen the work at O'Shell and McGregor has created this wonderful little city center. Florida and O'Shell Road, the same thing is happening there, where you have this mix of residential and commercial uses, and you have sidewalks and all of those things. Downtown Fairhope is the same sort of wonderful, you can live close enough to walk to a lot of your daily needs. So it's driven by a lot of things coming together at the same time.
It seems like in the beginning, or Dolphin Street was where everything began. Was there a reason behind that, or was it just happenstance, or what was it?
Dolphin Street developed as the retail spine from the earliest days.
Okay.
And I'm not sure why that happened back, in the early part of the 18th century. But Dolphin Street was where the shop fronts were. Dolphin and Royal were both what would be our main and main streets, our high streets. If we were living in Europe, we would call them our high streets. But they were where commerce happened, where retail happened, and that continues today. There's the way the blocks are set out. I mean, we are very lucky when we talk about creating a walkable urban environment in Mobile. One of the most important things to having a successful walkable urban environment is short blocks. Our blocks are only 300 feet long. And, they say, people who study this, the consultants that we've brought in, say 200 feet is the perfect walkable block, but we're certainly within an ideal size. And so that has encouraged a lot of the development that we're seeing with restaurants coming back. We now have 53 restaurants in downtown Mobile, mostly, along Dolphin and Royal Streets.
Right.
And, some wonderful retail, local independent retail. Goodness knows there's nothing harder than that. I don't know if you all have any clients who
Yes.
are, so that margin between success and failure is razor thin.
And it can change in 1 month.
Month to month, that's right. A bad month and or some unexpected expense and your air conditioner goes out, you may be out of business.
Right.
So supporting local retail is one of the areas that we are really not starting to focus on, but trying to figure out how we can focus on it more, how we can support it more. It's tough, but it's that, people have to understand that they're getting an experience when they go into a local shop. It's not just, not just ordering something online. For example, we operate a retail incubator, one of the many initiatives we have, the Urban Emporium. And, every night between 5 and 6, you come in, we'll give you a glass of wine. Well, you can't get that online.
Right. Right. Well, it all gets back to relationships, really. I mean, you can't have a relationship with your Amazon, rep or whatever. So
no, I don't know who's sending me whatever, And obviously, there are things that aren't available in this area that we need to order online, and some we all do it. It is part of 21st century life. I'm not. I don't want to criticize anybody who shops online, but maybe your first thought is, can I get it locally? Is there a local store? Because as we all know, a city like Mobile, sales tax is such an important part of our funding for city services. And the more we spend online, the less we support our fire, police, parks, sanitation, all of that suffers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Backing up a little bit in your bio, your degree is in communications and journalism, mass communications from Georgia, and you were a reporter, on-air personality anchor for many years.
For many years.
Yeah, how was that? I mean, and how did you end up in front of the camera to Mobile Downtown Alliance Director?
Well, there's probably a gap in my bio. For about 20 years in various markets around the Southeast, I worked in television news, and in 2000, I decided that I needed to. My children were kind of mid-teenage years, and I realized, well, they're going to be leaving town. They're going to be going off to school. I'm going to not have them around anymore. So I thought, well, I'll take off a couple of years and spend with them. In the meantime, Mike Dow was the mayor, and he called me up and he said, since you're not working now, would you help Ann Bedsole with the tricentennial effort? Well, when your mayor calls you, you say, yes, of course. What can I do? And Mobile's tricentennial was in 2002. She had been working for about 4 years before that, from about 1996 on, raising money, creating a plan to do a year-long celebration of our 300th birthday. And so I said, yes, I will help get, the communications effort underway. And then when it's, time for the whole thing to launch and you need to pay somebody, I'll step out and you can go on with that. And maybe I'll go back to TV or do something, I don't know, knit, I don't know. And so, we got so involved in that process, and I saw the opportunity to change how people felt about this city. And, after getting everything teed up for the tricentennial year, spending, a year or so on that, well, I didn't want to leave, not to mention we didn't have money to pay anybody, so I knew if the communications effort was going to continue, I had to stay on as a volunteer. But there were people who doubted that we could pull off what we did. And I'll never forget a phone call I got from a woman who said that we were, I don't know if you all remember, but the big event of that year was we brought in tall ships from around the world. And we had them docked along the waterfront. And, we'd been promoting that for months. I mean, this was a really big deal. And a woman called and she said, I don't know why you keep saying this event is going to happen. You know these ships aren't going to come to Mobile. And I was stunned that there were people who thought so little of the city that they were convinced we couldn't pull it off. And they live in a place that they had no faith in. And I thought, well, this is what we need to work on. We have got to change the image of the city and how people feel about it. And so a lot of the legacy projects of the tricentennial, Restore Mobile was part of it, which was beginning to address the issues of blight, Rebloom Mobile, beautification efforts. All of those things started. I won't say they started. There were always efforts before that, but they had a platform that they hadn't had previously for people to talk about and become aware of and invest in. And I think that was sort of a tipping point in a lot of areas. And from there, I spent a little bit of time with an ad agency. And then the opportunity to go to work, Elizabeth Stevens called me up and she said, come to work with me. I'd been on the Main Street Mobile board of directors, and she said, come, you've helped us get the Business Improvement District started. Come to work. And I said, I'll get paid to do what I've been volunteering to do for a long time. Why wouldn't I do that? And so 14 years later.
So every day you get the opportunity to advocate for your city. You get the opportunity to influence others to enhance the appreciation of the city. How neat is that?
It is a great job. Not that it's an easy job, because there's still a lot of resistance to, some of the work that we do, which is changing paradigms, changing how we think about transportation. We've been advocating, for the road diets on Water Street and Broad Street. And it's unbelievable to me how, people believe that appropriately sizing roads is the right thing to do because maybe they can't go quite as fast as they did before, when it's counterintuitive that you can create a more vibrant, vital, active city if you slow down the traffic. But that's what we have to do. We have to educate people that the way you create this city that can attract 21st century talent, which is what we want our children to stay here, move back here. We want them to be in a place that they love as much as we do. And one of the things we know about millennials and apparently the generation behind them is they look at where they want to live first and they move there and find a job second. And those cities are, because I've lost way too many interns to Houston and Austin and Seattle. they don't even have jobs when they move there. They say, I'll figure it out. I'll wait tables if I have to, but this is where I want to live. And we've got to make Mobile that kind of city if we want to continue to grow and compete for those jobs.
Well, you're definitely doing your part, and I can.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
were, yeah. I mean, you were, and you're passionate.
Well, it's
about
a
what
team.
You,
it is a team.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
you're leading that charge, and I think that's the results are obvious. So, as we start wrapping up, I noticed one of your hobbies is writing. So, do you, along the same vein, do you have an author that has really made an impact on you that you love to read, or a couple of books that that have really kind of impacted your life?
I'll tell you a book that I just finished reading, and I really recommend it, by Casey Cep, C-E-P, and the title is Furious Hours, and it's new, and it is the last trial of Harper Lee. So this is, you probably heard a little bit about it, but Harper Lee, after To Kill a Mockingbird, she had done all the research with Truman Capote for In Cold Blood. And so after To Kill a Mockingbird, she sort of struggled with the next novel. And she saw an opportunity, maybe true crime was novel as In Cold Blood would be the genre that she would attack. And so there was this amazing crime and trial in Alexander City. I won't go into it. Anyway, she took extensive notes, but she never wrote the book. She couldn't make it the book she wanted it to be, so she never wrote it. But this author, Casey Cep, a young journalist from Baltimore, took the notes and did all the investigation, and it is a fascinating read. It's beautifully written, but it's also a fascinating read. Great story, and it's close to home, so I would really recommend that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Casey Cep. We'll have to check that out. So, last question. Another hobby is travel. So, I'll kind of ask you a travel theme question. If you could get in our time machine and go back anywhere in history, where would you want to go, and why would you go there?
Wow, I think, just because I've done a little bit of reading about this, I think I'd like to go back to England during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And we think about it as this, glorious celebration of the arts and literature, and it was. But what's more interesting to me is how she took that little island nation that didn't really have a lot of world impact at the time and kept the struggles between the Protestants and the Catholics that were still bubbling up and could have erupted into just this epic, bloody battle again, and managed to mitigate that so there was some peace, and then defeated the Spanish Armada. I mean, I just think that would have been an interesting time. Difficult for women, I'm sure, unless you were Queen Elizabeth.
Right.
But I think that to have been at least an observer then would have been great.
That's great. Carol, thank you for what you're doing for Mobile. Thank you for coming on our little show and having some fun with us, and we truly appreciate it.
Well, I think what you're doing, bringing folks in to talk about things that are important to people, is wonderful. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Please visit www.downtownmobile.org to learn more about the Downtown Mobile Alliance. Well, thanks for listening to our podcast today. To never miss an episode, subscribe to Playing Above the Line at iTunes and anywhere else you get your podcast. And be sure to leave us a rating. We'd love to know what you think about our show.
To contact us or to stay connected, follow us on social media at HBKCPAS on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.